Welcome, all my precious relations. I'm Auntie Dr. Anita Sanchez. I'm Nahuatl, which is Aztec and Toltec. And I'm delighted for you to be here today. It's going to be a wonderful conversation. I have someone who I have been participating and watching her and learning from her and all the other elders in a particular organization called Earthrise Collective, and we'll talk about it later. But I did ask Rutendo Ngara. Is it Lorato? I didn't ask you about
Yes.
Lorato Ngara. I'm going to introduce you to her first, and then she has kindly accepted to center us and do a blessing. So, Rutendo Ngara is an African Indigenous Knowledge Systems practitioner and transdisciplinary researcher whose professional interests have spanned from clinical engineering, healthcare, technology management, socio-economic development, mathematics, leadership, and fashion design, to the interface between science, culture, cosmology, nature, and paradigms of healing. She is co-founder of Ancient Wisdom Africa and Ancient Wisdom Foundation, and is a member of a number of organizations dedicated to Indigenous knowledge, activism, and protection of sacred sites and biocultural regions, including the Grand Council of the Eagle and the Condor and the Earthrise Collective. Just a few more things, because I don't want to miss out. You need to know about her. Holding a Master's of Science in Biomedical Engineering, her transdisciplinary focus centers on synthesizing Western and Indigenous paradigms, particularly between medical knowledge systems, while bridging art, science, spirituality. Initiated into the African healing traditions, her transformative work embodies unity, healing, and advancing consciousness. Rutendo's life embodies the harmonious convergence of diverse perspectives, illuminating a path for a better future for all. So thank you so much for coming, Rutendo.
Thank you so much for having me, Auntie Anita.
Yes. And I invited you and you said yes to this a centering, a blessing. And so, and except for the people who are driving something, we want to remind them, don't close your eyes. I'm not sure if you're going to ask us to do that, but just let you all know, if you're doing a moving vehicle, please stay aware of your surroundings. Okay, Rutendo.
Thank you so much, Auntie Anita. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call in the breath and invite us into breathing with anything in us that has the potential to breathe or the ability. And it might be as obvious as our lungs, but it might be as not obvious as the tips of our fingers or the edges of our hair, or this grand organ that we call our skin. And through this, I'll call in the spirit of Africa, because that is where I'm from. And so we inhale. And we call in the all-pervasive spirit of Africa, the origin, the cradle of humanity, the cradle of life. We breathe in generations of ancient ones, the forebears who sit in circle, who breathe within us, who surround us, who ignite us, who empower us. We breathe in all ancestors from the 7 directions, those from the east, those from the west, those from the north, from the south, those from above, below, and from the center. And we exhale. And we breathe in all those great ones of Sankofa, those of the ancient past, those who are birthing an ancient future, and those who live now at the confluence of time and timelessness. And we exhale. We breathe in the great mothers, the nurturers, the creators. We breathe in the great fathers, the holders, the protectors. We breathe in the great warriors who exist in feminine and masculine form. We exhale. We breathe in the flowing spirits of the moon and the water, the still spirits of the earth and the mountains. We breathe in the fiery spirits of the suns, the cleansing spirits of the air and the wind. We breathe in the spirits of nature, and we exhale. We breathe in the eagle, the falcon, the hawk who sees it all. We breathe in the lionheart who reveres it all. We breathe in the elephantine matriarch who remembers it all. We exhale. We breathe in the wisdom of the Nile River, the nourisher of great civilizations, the bringer of Ma'at, she who tracks first time. We breathe in the obscurity of the Niger River, who takes not the most efficient route to the ocean, but the long, winding, accommodating route, the effective route. We exhale. We breathe in the power of the Congo River, who brings deepest healing from the deepest wounds of Africa. We breathe in the meanderings of the Zambezi, the mighty curtain of water in Musuwatunya, the waters of life from the great dryings of Mahadi. We exhale. We breathe in Senku River, the Harip or the Orange River, who carries wisdoms from our ancient Barwa, the Batwa, our First Nations peoples, our common ancestors. We exhale. We breathe in the ancient wisdoms from within. We breathe in the activism from without. We breathe in the visionaries that are yet to come. We breathe in the whisperers of Untu, those who plant seeds, collective seeds of consciousness, those who raise Bantu, Hantu, Kintu, Kuntu into an interwoven web of connectedness. We breathe in the creative powers of our sacred spaces and places throughout the world. We exhale. We breathe in the great baobab, the tree of life as we call in the breath. We breathe in the cycles of creating. We breathe in this year, this month, this day, this hour, this minute, this moment in time and timelessness. We honor the great ancestors who unite us all. We honor mitochondrial Eve. We walk upon the intergenerational bridge between the past and the present. We breathe in the values of the future. We breathe together, dream together, see together. We recreate together, renew together, regenerate together. We are agents of the future calling. We breathe in, we breathe out, for we are one. Samagu, Tabasani, Ashe.
So in your own time, that was so beautiful. Oh, you can open your eyes. And I want all the people to do exactly what you asked, to just pay attention to what was happening with your body. So make note of that. And I know for me, it was my skin, and I could feel my skin, and the air and water is like, it was just, it was very clear. So thank you so much for having us start this very beautiful way. And I can't help but say that you talked about a number of things in that I'm here in the United States. I've traveled a lot, but I don't know. So I want to honor that I don't know, and ask you if you could tell us a little bit about the rivers. When you were talking about the rivers, and there are different rivers, and of course different accents to name them. But can you tell me the importance of river or water in your life, and about those specifically things you talked about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Africa has the most amazing attributes when it comes to bodies of water, whether it's the streams or the waterfalls or the lakes, but especially the rivers. I mean, we've got the longest river in the world, which is the Nile River. And the Nile River defies common logic that everything should flow from the north to the south. The Nile River flows from south to north in that long, more than 6,600 kilometers that it travels. We have the most obscure river in the world, with the route that is the most obscure river, which is the Niger River. And the Niger River is in the west of Africa. And it arises 240 kilometers from the Atlantic Ocean. And modern science will tell us that or economics will tell us that it should flow economically and efficiently. And what it would do is that arising 240 kilometers in the highlands of Guinea, it should flow down from the highlands to the lowlands until it eventually drains into the Atlantic Ocean. But just like the Nile River, which flows from south to north, the Niger is defiant, as the rivers of Africa are. It flows instead into the desert. It flows in a north-easterly direction into the desert, into that which has got no water. And it continues flowing into this northeasterly direction. And then the science of linearity will tell us that it should continue in that northeasterly direction and perhaps eventually drain into the Mediterranean Sea to join the Nile. But it doesn't do that. Instead, it turns at a very critical place called Timbuktu, where we know there was a great university, in Mali. And it starts doing an obscure course, kind of this crescent-like course, going through different countries like Niger and Nigeria, Benin, until it drains into the Atlantic Ocean at the Niger Delta. And this time, instead of traveling 240 kilometers, which would be efficient, from the highlands to the lowlands, it travels more than 4,200 kilometers. And in this journey, in this obscure journey that it takes, it becomes completely inefficient. It loses its potential flow because at times it's not flowing downstream. It's flowing either on the flatland or it's flowing upstream. So it loses a lot of potential. It loses a lot to secret. It loses a lot to evaporation. So it's highly inefficient. It becomes sluggish. It's highly inefficient as a moving body of water. But this inefficiency creates lakes as large as Belgium. This inefficiency creates one of the highest areas of biodiversity on the planet, on the continent. This inefficiency creates, sustenance for more than 40 different peoples, and millions, on the African continent. So this really inefficient river is very effective at creating life. And I believe that the rivers have so many stories to tell, when we watch the way they flow. We've also got, as I mentioned, Zambezi River. It's the river with the highest curtain of water, biggest curtain of water in the world. They call it Msiwatunya, or Victoria Falls as it's colloquially known, which is just the largest curtain of water in the world that's dropping. And it flows carrying all the nutrients from the volcanic areas, and flowing them through, all the different countries, the 6 countries it flows into, until eventually it drains into the Indian Ocean. And so there's a lot that tells us about this great power of this curtain of water. But we also have the deepest and most powerful river in the world. And this is the Congo River. And this river arises in what I call the wound of Africa. So this is the East African Rift Valley. And with plate tectonics, the rift is slowly, obviously over millions of years, breaking the African continents apart to the point that it's not going to look like it looks like in a couple of million years, because the Horn of Africa will have broken off, along the East African Rift Valley. So this is a great wound. But that wound is a highly volcanic, highly active place, which means that there's a lot of activity that produces that which comes from the belly of the earth, and that which comes from the belly of the earth is incredibly rich. It's full of nutrients. It is full of that which seeds life, as we know in highly volcanic areas. And it is from this that this really deep and powerful river arises from this great wound. And this river flows through the Congo jungle. It flows through until it eventually drains in the Atlantic Ocean in the west of the continent. But it flows through also one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. And it flows through an area which has so much medicine, because it's carrying all of this medicinal memory from the wounds from where all of this erupts. So it tells us a lot. This river tells us a lot, that power and depth that we can get from allowing the wounds to heal. And I believe that these are some of the stories that the rivers have to tell. And many other stories tell many other things. They're told in the way that they're named. They're told, in the way that they flow. But I believe that the rivers, just like all of nature or the terre, is a metaphor for how we as humanity should be living life.
Yeah. Ooh, I felt like, as you were saying that, I've only been to 5 countries in Africa, and just little bits of them. I knew when I went to those places, it would take many lifetimes to see everything. And but what hope that, what I'm feeling as you're saying that is exactly when you ended with unity, that we're all one, but I could feel in my body, maybe that was the wind and the water, but these places that have stories and then they heal the wounds. Could you say more about the healing the wounds? Is that the part that you were talking about where their inefficiencies are actually very effective serving everyone? Okay.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely, and I think that comes to what you mentioned in my introduction that you mentioned the Earthrise Collective, where a lot of what we do within the Earthrise Collective and within another group of Indigenous collective that I'm a part of, the Grand Council of the Eagle and the Condor. What we're really trying to do is to go deep into the great woundings of humanity, also from a lot of, for instance, the colonial histories, coming from South Africa, they're part of histories. But also the woundings that have been afflicted upon our great ancestor, which is the great planet that we are a part of. And so a lot of what we do is about how do we go back into natural law? How do we go back into natural conversation? How do we go back into natural ways of being and interacting with our mother, with our father, with our grandfather, which is the earth, the wind, the waters, the fires above and below, that we interact with at an elemental space. And how do we do this particularly at very high power places, our sacred, what we may call natural sacred sites upon which many of our man-made sacred sites have been built, whether it is, I'm currently here in Mexico, whether it is like the pyramids of Teotihuacan or Chichen Itza or in Egypt or, wherever, but where they carry so much knowledge, but a lot of that knowledge has been stored through the wounding, because the wounding activates, the wounding, takes us from perhaps our very blasé, still nature, and it takes us from harmony into disharmony. And the natural course of life is to try and have a sinuous relationship, to try and have a movement. And so if we're taken into disharmony, the natural course of life from natural law will be to take us back into harmony, and then we continue this dance. So the wounding, if we interact with it carefully and with awareness and with mindfulness, the wounding is there to actually take us back into a higher state of consciousness. And I believe that, for instance, this is what the Congo River tells us, because it is from this wound, kind of this physical wound on the continent that, it flows into one of the most water-rich countries in the world, which unfortunately that country has become quite water scarce because of war, war over resources and therefore, the destruction of infrastructure. But still in that, there's a lot of medicine because, the Congo jungle it's kind of second only to the Amazon just in terms of all that it carries, just in terms of the depth of medicine and the indigenous peoples who are still in relationship, with that great medicine, that is brought from this great power, and this great depth of the river as it interacts with the earth and therefore produces all that is redent, in terms of the biosphere. So I believe that there's so much to learn, of how wounding moves within us, from a shamanic perspective, or from an indigenous perspective. When somebody has a calling to become a healer, most of the times it comes through a deep illness, a deep sickness, a deep discomfort, a deep dis-ease, something that pushes you away from the harmony into disharmony, because it is from the process of healing self that we are now able to go out and heal other, which is what I believe the Niger River is doing as it moves. Instead of going to the Atlantic Ocean, which feeds in a river, it's like, let me move into the other, let me move into that which is parched, that which has no water, that which, is desolate, and let me go into there and bring forth my healing, because I have learned to move away from that which is comfortable in going straight to, to the ocean that refuses no river. So I believe, that they're metaphors, but the metaphors, in the way nature flows, especially water in this case, has a lot to teach us about how to interact with life. If only we have the ears to listen, and
the courage.
the eyes to see, and the courage. Indeed.
I was going to say, when you were saying that, with all these different places in the water and the wounds that it was healing, I just think how courageous African people are. And I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be, patronizing at all, but rather it's important for us to hear that a way to go into harmony is disharmony happens and you heal. And that healing process we all can do. And you just gave us great metaphor, but also very solid physical thing in terms of water. And just even our language of how we say and why we would condemn something that is doing its purpose. And so I thank you for that. I thank you a lot. That's great. That's beautiful. And also, as you the centering you did for us could take a lot of time, just going to every piece. But as I was traveling with you, listening with the softest part of my ears, and I noticed my heart was expanding at the same time, I was curious. Maybe I picked them up, but not with words. The philosophy and the principles that I know Africa is very big and different, so I don't want to say all Africa, but that some of those philosophies and principles, if you'd like to articulate some of those that either came through on the thing or other ones.
Yeah.
Like a Mutu, and I'm probably saying it right. Yes, because I know people hear that, and I'm not sure they always understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, no. So Ubuntu, I love Ubuntu, and obviously it is a principle that stems from the Bantu people, and has become very much into our collective consciousness, especially coming from Southern Africa in recent times. And it is often understood, or the saying, or the axiom is, "I am because we are," or "I am because you are." And from some of the indigenous languages, it is "umuntu gumuntu gabantu," which is a person is a person through other persons. Or munu munu panevani, which is the same meaning in Shona, or mutu kimutu kabati, which is the same in the Sotho language. So there's this constant relationship between self and the other, and that I cannot exist because of the other. Now, one of the perhaps the shortcomings in terms of how, I believe people have come to understand it, is that they've taken a very anthropocentric view of it, that it's only about, they've taken the person to be the human, and yes, it really speaks to how we relate as humanity. But when we dig deep a little into the quantum science of it, a person is, and we dig into the etymology of the word, a person is that which is made of sound. And, and sound is a primal, frequency of creation, in the universe. It's slower than light, but it's primal to that, which creates. And when we go into many of the ancient texts, of different, whether it is different indigenous spoken or oratory texts, or whether it is written texts, a lot is said that creation was manifested through sound. It was said, it was spoken in. And so a person is, yes, it's a human, person, but it is that which is made of sound. And so much is made of, everything is made of sound.
Yeah, the energy, yeah.
And so when we then start breaking down Ubuntu, we see that it's important to look at the suffix of Ntu. And the Ntu it's kind of like it's the singularity, if you want to go into quantum physics. It is the dynamic life force. It is that which animates all. It is that which, is primal, to all of life. It is that which, precedes, subsists and persists, in order to make life. And this, it's the 0 point. And this, dynamic life force is 0 point of singularity, according to Ubuntu philosophy and cosmology, actually manifests in in 4 different categories. And the first category is what we call Bantu. And now I've said that this is I come from the Bantu peoples, that's what we said, of Africa. But when we go into Ubuntu or, Ubuntu language, Bantu is actually the human manifestation of Ubuntu. And Omuntu, rather, is the singular, is the individual. It's the human, manifestation of Ubuntu. It is how Ubuntu moves within reasoned beings that we may call humans. And then when it's in the plural, it is Bantu. That's the plural. Mu is the singular and plural is Ba. And so, even though colloquially I come from the Bantu people, according to Ubuntu philosophy, we are all Bantu. All humans are Bantu, because it is through all of us that this Bantu moves through us as reasoned beings, that we are. But listen, too doesn't stop at reasoned beings. It also acts and moves and animates that which, perhaps those who are reasoned beings can act upon. So it moves through the caves, it moves through the minerals, it moves through the water, it moves through, all the elements of nature that are not human. And this is what we call kintu, when it moves, through the inanimate, we call this kintu, and I hear the wind is responding, at the moment.
Yeah.
Or bintu in its plural. But what's really interesting from an African perspective is that trees do not fall into the category of things, so these are things, what we may call things. It doesn't fall into the non-human. They fall actually as Bantu. They're people. And they're people because they're able to be intercessors between the past, present, and the future. And they're able to be intercessors between the different realms of existence. And it is for this reason that when a person dies in old Africa, we plant a tree, because that is then able to carry its spirit, which, because it's got different worlds. It's got the world underground, with its roots. It's got the world in the trunk, which is in the present, and it's got its world going towards the stars and its branches, and that is why a tree is actually our closest thing relative, and, which is really important in terms of the tree of life because of how it intercedes between different realms of being. But then Ubuntu doesn't just stop at humans and things. It actually becomes even more ethereal, so to speak. And Ubuntu also moves within time and space. And it moves especially where time and space collapse into a single continuum. And according to African cosmology, it's always known, what quantum physics recently learned, in the past 150 years, that time-space collapse into a continuum, and this is what we call Hantu. And what we find is that especially in Southern Africa, a lot of places are named with a prefix like Ha, because each place is named according to its locality and temporality, So there's a story of time and space in how things are named. There are different iterations of it. Sometimes it's Kwa, so you may have a place called Kwandebele. Sometimes it's Ha, so you may have a place called Hamujaji. You may have a place called Hamulima. Whatever it is, but every place has a time and space. Everything has time and space. In that continuum, and Ubuntu is also time and space. And then Ntu doesn't just stop in time and space, and it moves completely into the intangible. It moves into all things that we cannot necessarily see but sense. So it moves into beauty, it moves into rage, it moves into hatred, it moves into, kind of wonder, it moves into all that which is not a thing that we can see, touch, or feel, and this is what we call kuntu. And so when we see that Ntu, the singularity, this dynamic life force moves through everything, then we realize that I am because you are. A person is a person through other persons means I'm related to everything. I'm related to the stars. I'm related to the blade of grass. I'm related to the ant. I'm related to Auntie Anita on the other side of the ocean. I'm related to all. And therefore, because everything is my relative, I am going to treat it as if it were me. Because, and I'm going to treat it with the respect and the honor. I am going to ask permission before trampling upon, the ground, because it is another, that is a reflection of me. I am going to speak to the river. I'm going to be in a cave and allow the cave to speak to me because it is my relative and it holds memory and it holds wisdom. And because of that, we do not see a separation between humans and the rest of creation. I am because you are. I am because we are. I am because all that is. Because it's also contextualized between the past, present, and the future. And so Ubuntu is all about relativity. It is all about, it's about the quantum way in which everything is related. It is about, in physics, they talk about the observed effect. All of that is carried within kind of the principle of Ubuntu. Yeah.
So first of all, thank you. I've never heard the explanation that fully. And so the whole illusion of separateness in time and space and here, whatever, doesn't make sense. But as you did that, I just wanted to tell you, when I was growing up, there is the Osage, my grandmother cousin married an Osage man. So we used to go there all the time. And in fact, I thought I was Osage until I got older. And no, you'd call them grandfather and uncle, but they're not blood relatives. But and he would teach us. He would always start. I'm going to say it very simply because what you did was so beautiful and all the nuances. But I also know he would always put his hands in a circle and it was flat. It wasn't up, down. It was like this. And he said, to be a human being is to understand all beings, that we're part of all of them, people, earth, and spirit. And if you did something to the people, you also did something to the earth and the spirit. And if you do good things to the earth, you're also doing good things to the spirit. And he would go around in that, and no one's higher and no one's lower. But when he said no one, he was really clear to talk about the creepy crawlers, the different things that we see in rural Missouri and Kansas, where I grew up. And so when you did that, I'm going to listen to it again because it was so beautiful. But I actually felt, again, going to what you're saying, time and space is very, it's not as we think it is. I could feel my Uncle Lara here saying, oh, this is so good that you're learning an African, a very deep principle, a knowing of how we be, and we be one with all of its different and similar parts, because it is all what we're made up of. So thank you for that. That was, you just took us, you've taken us on a few journeys already here, Rutendo. I'm sure that people listening to that is like, yeah, just let it vibrate the sound inside of us. And I really thank you for when you use the different languages, because I know in my tribe, a lot of the languages are gone, are different, but the ones that do exist, we know that the sound itself causes different things, or allows it to be seen, and we listen better. So what you explained was just very, very powerful. Thank you. So I can't let you go, because you talked about also sorry, I'm just taking it in still. But you also talked about being part of the eagle and the condor. That
Wow.
I can't let you go without people hearing what that is,
Yeah.
because I don't want them to miss that. That's a really
Yeah.
important prophecy, and you, I think you may have a lot more than I even know about it. So,
Yeah. Yes. So I am very, very privileged to be. I've just recently been invited to sit on the Grand Council of the Eagle and the Condor. And the Grand Council of the Eagle and the Condor was initially convened between the Americas following the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, basically about the north and the south and the different times in which we have been, the time of the eagle, the time of the condor, the time of the north, the time of the south, the time of the mind, the time of the heart. And that, there would come a time when it is no longer the time of the eagle and it's no longer a time of the condor, but it is a time when they then, fly together. And this comes at a great time of turning. And that prophecy has been telling us that we are in that time of turning. And it is that time when now the heart and the mind need to unite, when the masculine and the feminine need to unite, when the north and the south need to unite. And the Council of the Eagle and the Condor has then gone beyond that. They have stockholders, from the Americas, from the north and the south, and kind of telling us, kind of the relationship between, as I said, the heart and the intuition and the feminine, and how it relates to the mind, industry and the masculine. And they say that now is the time for unification, and we're in this time of unification. That will bring in unprecedented peace and harmony. And they've now extended this beyond the Americas to say, but this unification process is not just about unifying the North and the South, where this prophecy is known, because we have all sorts of other prophecies that are similar. Within, for instance, in the East, they talk about the prophecy of the dragon and the phoenix, which is, kind of a similar dichotomy. We in Africa, we may even speak about the elephant and the lion, because they carry kind of these different dichotomies in the same way as the eagle and the condor do. And so now they have extended from a council of 7 stakeholders into a representative each from the different continents. And I'm privileged to be the representative of the African continent for now. So now we're a council of 13. But after this, we're going to keep moving this within different biocultural regions in the world, to create a council of 52. And the whole aim is that we are aiming to work with certain earth mandates, which is one is to establish councils for earth stewardship, because how do we draw on our original ways of knowing in order to steward the earth and create councils for earth stewardship? How do we protect key biocultural sites, which is so necessary, and especially many of which we call sacred sites, for keeping the planet intact, in so many different ways. Sometimes they say the sacred sites are like the nuns of the planet. How do we create centers of traditional knowledge and ancestral wisdom to bring back, as we spoke about, many of the languages have been lost, how do we create centers of traditional knowledge and ancestral wisdom that are able to bring back a lot of that which has been lost in the particular biocultural regions, but also how do we start finding ways that they interact, around different cultures? How do we enshrine new values for humanity? And then also, how do we lead a renaissance for our ancestral biocultural heritage? So this is, what we're trying to do, just in terms of bringing now kind of different indigenous knowledge holders from different parts of the world. Right now, as I say, we have a council that now has representatives from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, from Oceania, and from the Arctic, which has joined, these in a unification process that's seeking to bring our knowledge systems together, both for the protection of our indigenous wisdoms, our ancient wisdoms, but also how it spills out into how we really create sites for protecting the planet, and creating our biocultural regions. So that is, again, the Council of the Eagle and the Condor, and also bringing in all our cosmovisions that tally with the prophecy of the Eagle and the Condor. And it's really interesting. We're starting to see so many synergies as we are in conversation and in ceremony, because it's not just in conversation that insights come, but it's also in the co-dreaming, it is in the ceremony, it is listening to the fire, it is watching the water, it is, it is through these ways that we're able to get knowledge that moves beyond the eagle knowledge, which is just the knowledge of the head, but, just that of the heart knowledge, and, bringing it together with the ether, and allowing, spirit to guide from the original instructions, which are common to all.
Yeah. And as people are listening, there are indigenous people, and there's people who would not call themselves that, or lost track of their whole lineage. When you're talking about this, I understand you're coming together and you're going to participate in bringing back the knowledge, this different ceremonies and places. But as you say that, it sounds like it involves all of us. It is, because it's about. So I just want to make sure that as people were listening, you're talking about all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, all of us. And when you said that, what it reminded me of is when we usually talk about unification, oftentimes people think outside themselves of unification. We need to stop these 35 wars. We need to stop the climate disasters that are happening and all that. But also, we have to think about unification of our head and heart, is what you're talking about too. Align with our gut, our spirit, because otherwise we need to be working on all of it, because we will not be able to create what really is truth, the original knowledge, if we're stuck in this separation. So I always ask people, when you hear unification, as you said it, it's about all of us. We're part of the whole process, and I'm grateful to you and to the others who are giving your lives and your time for all of us in reigniting that original knowledge, and bringing in perhaps even some knowledge that, because we're in separate continents, we may be missing little parts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's just wonderful. So there's so much more we could ask you and stuff, but I want to make sure and give you time for the last 5 minutes that we have together, is to, what else? I mean, everything you've told us, but I want to make sure if there's anything else you want us to know, if there are any dreams that you have, and also, how do we find you? Has everybody find you? So, is there something else that's showing up for you that you want to? Oh, I want you all to know this, or hear this, or explore this.
Yeah. Well, perhaps like just what's interweaving with the Eagle and the Condor elders is we have another collective, of which we're blessed that you always come to our full moon gatherings, which is the Earthrise Collective, which is taking a lot more of an activist, perspective. But it's really about, kind of asking, what old school activism has forgotten, in terms of what we need in order to be able to create the world where we believe the world for our future generations, a regenerative, prosperous world, a safe world, a harmonious world, or whatever it is, an equitable world, which there's equity and equality. And what many of these hardcore activists, said in the peak of COVID was, we forgot our ancient wisdom. We forgot the grandmothers. We even forgot the voices of the children, and this is what old school activism forgot. And so, but then it's like, okay, if we bring in our ancient wisdom, if we bring in, we start reminding ourselves of, that which was forgotten, what does it mean? And it is, so that we can create a future, and therefore it means that we need to create alternative ways of seeing, being, and doing. And so the Earthrise Collective has this dance and this weave between ancient wisdom, activism, and alternatives, which is, what we try and weave together. And that is woven in a principle that mirrors that obscure river that I spoke about, the Niger River. The Niger River goes back on itself, because it starts in one place and then it kind of goes back before it drains in itself. So, and that is a principle that we call Sankofa, which comes from West Africa. And it's usually depicted as a glyph of a bird turned back on itself with, sometimes it's got either an egg or a seed in its beak. And Sankofa, from the colloquial understanding, it's historical recovery. We need to go back into the past to get what, to fetch what we have forgotten from the past, the ways of our grandmothers and our grandfathers and our forebears, bring it into the present, and it is in the present that we're able to take that, transform it, seed it, water it, nurture it, and in order to be able to birth the future. But when we start looking into Sankofa more deeply, we realize that it's not just about time, about going into the past, into the present, into the future. But Sankofa really speaks about the universal principle of feedback. Once again, we start seeing how, these glyphs that, kind of seem kind of cute and, good to put on clothes and, artifacts actually are kind of deeply scientific principles, and we start seeing how it speaks to how feedback is important. And so this is what we keep trying to do with the Earthrise Collective, because you then feed the future back into the past, in order to come into the present, and this is the constant, flow, between the past, present, and future, because from an Indigenous perspective, we do not believe that time is linear. It is able to turn back on itself. And so that's what we do. We have a wonderful collection of Indigenous elders, many of whom are part of the Council of the Eagle and the Condor from around the world, from Oceania, from, the East, from the Americas, from Africa, from Europe, who come together always to co-dream, and in a space of co-dreaming as a collective. How we can go back to our original instructions and the meta instructions, which are universal to us all, independent of our territories, and how they're articulated within our particular cultures, and how that informs the activism, which is not necessarily anti-activism, but maybe pro-activism or post-activism, in order to be able to create an alternative future. So I believe that, just taking the Earthrise Collective as maybe as a metaphor, is that we are in the time of the collective. We're at a time where it is really important to recognize that we're all persons, we're all of sound, and we're allowing the sounds around us to inform the sound that is within, in order to collectively create the sound that is without. And I believe it is through these collective actions, the collective dreamings, the collective ways of being, that we perhaps have what in the Earthrise Collective says, we have been on the Titanic, but we have the potential to build a new canoe, and a new canoe, in which we all have our oar. And, when we're in harmony with this canoe is has the potential to take a different path, which is able to meet this time that we're in, which all the great prophecies have spoken about, this great time of turning. And so, that is the last thing I'd like to tell.
Thank you. That was very helpful. As you're, I don't know if you probably know this, because you're really, the way you speak and stuff. It's you're telling a story all the time, but I also feel like it's our story. It's my story with different things, and so there isn't in nature. Yes, there's the going against different ways, and that seem that to not make sense. But there isn't room for hopelessness. Like I've never, even in really desolate places or things that have burned down, I'm not hopeless, because then something sprouts, from those ashes and things. So I think that's an important thing for everyone to be hearing. And I'm so glad you added that at the end, because, it is a time where many people, both activists and people who aren't active, that are actually almost paralyzed, like I can't do anything. No, begin this process. Everyone is being called. And appreciate you so much for hearing the call and being such a great messenger of all of this. So I just want to thank you. And I want to make sure that you get in if there's a dream you want to share so that we can put our energy in that dream. And if there's how to get a hold of you. And we'll be sure to put it in the written stuff too, but I want them to hear it.
Yeah. Hard to get a hold of me. I had a dream, and that dream was being invisible. I'm not doing a very good job.
That sounds like some good love of self and care. I get that.
I had a dream of an invisibility code. It's not working too well for me.
Well, maybe it's an organization rather than specifically so they can learn more about it, how they can support it too. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the organizations, it is the Earthrise Collective. Which we can find our details on the Earthrise Collective website. But it's also Ancient Wisdom, which is the organization that I co-founded, where we're really looking at Ancient Wisdom as a collective, a university, but we're rooting it in Mama Africa. Really, wanting to see what is the ancient wisdom of Africa that can be brought out there. And so that's our details are on the Ancient Wisdom Africa website. Ancient Wisdom Africa website.
So we'll be sure, everyone, as Rutendo is saying, we'll be sure to have it in the written how you can follow up on what you're up to, which many people are up to, which is so hopeful that this ancient wisdom is part of all of us, going back but coming forward and twisting and turning. I just so appreciate you, and thank you. I just thank you for everyone and from everyone and for myself very much, because the time here, I've been maybe a year and a half coming to Earthrise Collective. I don't know if it's 2 years, but I always have a strong physical reaction, very positive, but also that was not seen as well. And I think today what you've done is helped us all understand a little bit more about your perspective. What is an African perspective? And so I appreciate you. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for this beautiful podcast that you curate. Thank you.